Well, I'm.
I think, yeah,
Okay.
we're probably on.
Please.
Yep.
I was going to, if there was any doubt about Sian's capacity as a host, just to seek to maximise my emotion before coming on stage, Sian. So very grateful, but enormously appreciative of the invitation and to be having this dialogue in a place like this with a group of, I feel like I found my people again, you know, a group of passionate, committed people who are brave enough to recognise the health system as we see it as being really wonderful and something we can all be proud of, but bold enough to suggest that that change is possible, doing so is necessary, and Sian, for your great work, you owe, I think, apology to absolutely nobody. So well done to you.
No pressure for the rest of the day, Sean. I was going to briefly introduce Tim, linking, I guess, him as well with my previous experience with Nicole in the space of teaching and research and sort of re-emphasizing the fact that she was such a passionate advocate throughout, but also really somebody doing things, really. And so my experiences in teaching, for example, were something that I'll take away for a long, long time. And I was going to go on to say that Tim was just as extraordinary, but he's already jumped the gun, so you already see the type of character we've got at the fireside chat this morning. Are we expecting a guest? Okay. I was just wondering whether this was a kind of Australian version of musical chairs, the other way around. Too many chairs, less people. So my name is Fred Holland. I'm I think here for two reasons. One of them is Jane's fault, as we've now established, for sitting, Sian and I, next to each other at the faculty conference last year, and us starting to think we have to do more things together. So that's one of the aspects. The other aspect is obviously the connection that I had with Nicole, and since then with Tim, who's been a wonderful friend, really, to exchange with on a regular basis. And so I guess, Tim, as you know, we kind of would like to understand what your views are around what would make a difference for patients, but maybe we'll start with why we're here in the first place and what was the story that you and Nicole shared for a while, and then we'll move on from that.
Yeah, I suppose by day I'm a managing director in a private equity business buying infrastructure assets. So if you're looking to sell an airport, I'll put my number on the board, I suppose. My bona fides here, and it does feel strange sort of pontificating on this particular subject to people, I would refer to myself as being an accidental recipient of a bunch of experiences that I view are very important to share and to have that dialogue. So I lost Nicole to stage 4 metastatic colorectal cancer after 6 years, and I'll kind of speak to that experience. As a 32-year-old, I was diagnosed with a low-grade, low-volume Gleason 6 prostate tumour, so I've been treated for that and gone through that on the primary side. I've gone through with my mum the treatment, who's now in remission for lymphoma, and with my dad, who was treated through radical prostatectomy for a Gleason 7 prostate cancer. And so I think I feel very important to provide nuts and bolts feedback, having been on the edge of the bed in theatre, to having been there for the 3 a.m. chats of what dexamethasone does to the body during chemo, to have sat through all 70 of Nicole's chemotherapy sessions, to have self-funded immunotherapy, and to probably hold the record for eating more egg sandwiches at the Epworth than anyone else alive. So of every aspect of that, I feel I can, whether I like it or not, talk to it in detail from the patient perspective. So I suppose that's my bona fides to share today, Fred.
Thank you, Tim. I guess, obviously, and that's one of the reasons we're here today, the thing that struck Nicole and yourself throughout was the huge complexity of that system, and particularly in the case of Nicole specifically, where the disease profile was complex, and so that enhanced that aspect. Do you want to run us maybe through what you thought of those complexities, and then we'll move on later to picking maybe out of that some of the low-hanging fruits in a way that you think could make things better?
Sure. So a big topic. So Nicole had a her primary tumour was in her descending colon. It was she was microsatellite stable. KRAS G12V was her microbiology. She was diagnosed with no family history. She was diagnosed when our little boy was 6 months old without other symptoms. She simply felt tired. Went to the GP. Really was pushed away initially for being, and I'm walking the tightrope of mansplaining a bit here, of being a hypochondriac woman, right? And there was real pushback on that about the capacity for GPs to take that seriously, notwithstanding the symptoms. Nicole's a very empowered individual and went back after 2 weeks and said, no, we're gonna run the bloods. Let's continue to push. They did that. In the end, they scanned her liver. She was diagnosed as having focal nodular hyperplasia, so really a series of freckles on her liver, akin to what Caucasian women can get from being on long series of the contraceptive pill. But on the back of the scan, it said several lesions bared exclusion. And so once they did then a liver MRI, it became clear that she had cancer that had metastasized. Originally, there was complexity as to whether it was breast or colorectal cancer. They didn't find the primary originally. They found it in the liver. In terms of, and to pick up on, I think, Tina's excellent presentation about teamwork, Nicole's was a complicated case. At one point, we had involved simultaneously a colorectal surgeon, a hepatic surgeon, an endocrinologist, a gastroenterologist, an oncologist, a radio-oncologist, a physio, a GP, and of course, kind of mental health through the treatment of that. And if you're wondering who sits at the hub or the centre point as to how we arrange ourselves, the answer is the patient. And they've got to do that at the worst possible time when they're the most compromised. We were fortunate, I suppose, I don't know the politically correct way to say either of those things, of having enough intellectual firepower to grapple with the issues of the day, and we had the financial firepower of having the ball bounce the right way for us in life. And even then, it was financially, physically, and emotionally exhausting, right, to do that. And so when Jane gets up and speaks, or Tina again made a fabulous point, is that you can change the medical system 1,600 graduates at the time. The cultural shift to collaborative practice is profound and compounding, right? To have people to do that. We try and solve this in the medical system, I suppose, through the use of the MDT to mix success, right? To mix success. Forcing people to do things is kind of no way to get along. You need a cultural value of wanting to work together. But as it sits at the moment, that being incumbent on the patient to manage is a very, very difficult thing. We struggled, and I think earnestly we were as well placed as anybody. So sorry, it's a long answer to a short question.
It's a wonderful answer. And going on with something that Tina mentioned around teams as well, I guess my question would be, did you feel that the different clinicians that were looking after Nicole were really a team, in fact? And number one, and number two, as a patient, did you feel part of that team, really? Because you should be.
Yeah, I think good clinicians tend to be a bit like mercury in that they coagulate. I'll make a joke that Nicole and I shared, that when you choose a clinician of any variety in the private sector, you always want someone who's divorced. You need to know you're the most important person that day. And they need to have an expensive card that shows they've been doing this long enough to make poor financial choices, right? Those are the two critical ones. Did they work together? Yeah, they did, but it took a surprising amount of push for us to help formalise that, right? To have surgeons can be, and forgive me for painting as a broad brush, a bit akin to, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're a surgeon, you do surgery, right? And a lot of people push back against kind of action man syndrome, but surgeons want to do surgery and oncologists want to provide chemotherapy. They just do, right? And so getting them to discuss that and do a good job of that took real effort. So yes, we're a team. Was the interaction perfect? No, it wasn't. To make a point, and please try to see me as Nicole as I make this point, it was much easier for me to deal with the clinicians as a middle-aged man than it was for Nicole. And Nicole would concede the point that having Tim speak slowly in a deep voice to people who are not used to being spoken to like that had real effect. I think the audience is probably 90% women. I suspect that resonates a lot. Please, not my point, Nicole's point. She would want you to hear that. But that's a challenge. That is a real challenge. And that probably is at no bigger point of importance than the selection of a GP. That mums and dads with daughters, husbands with wives, you know, that women really deserve to be heard, triaged, listened to at the GP level, because the primary diagnosis and the timetable is just so important. So I make those points from me, but they're really Nicole's points.
We did comment when we were sitting at the front on how few men were in this room. And so I guess I would engage everyone to push your, including myself, push your male colleagues to get interested. I don't know if it's a lack of interest or if they were just not available today, which is a shame. Or if Sean doesn't manage to convince men as well as women. It couldn't be that. I guess, so, Tim, we've talked a lot about what this meant in terms of difficult conversations throughout the process, right? And again, you did make the point very well that you and Nicole were well equipped for those. There are a lot of people who are not. The situation is completely unacceptable, really. In terms of how you navigated that and your kind of vision probably of some other people around you, other patients maybe navigating at the same time, are there kind of key sort of first points that you think would make a massive difference to that journey and simplify it in a way?
I think all things we can do at a societal level to improve health literacy may be as good a health investment as you can possibly make, right, for those things. I don't think you have to like golf to know what a birdie is. And health is a bit like that too, right? Investing in the relationship with your GP, understanding sort of upstream familial illnesses, or just having an understanding that health is important, and if you don't manage it, nobody else will, right? I think that's really profound. I suppose it sits out there with superannuation and taxation, things we would rather not think about, but actually have real consequence on the lives that we lead. So whether that's at schooling age, whether it's at university, the way we interact with GP as sort of primary carer, I think that makes an enormous difference. Probably less by choice, but by force, Fred. I would say that Nicole and I went in very heavily to being experts to help ourselves navigate. Nicole would get, I would say 3 to 5 a day messages, and probably do an hour on the phone in 3 20-minute blocks a night with people all over the world who would reach out and say, I just got diagnosed with colorectal cancer. I don't know what the first call to make is, right? I don't know, I don't understand the framework for thinking about this, staging, mutation, chemotherapy, surgery. It just feels like it's written in a foreign language and I don't know what to do. And so that literacy piece for me, as we work through, a little bit like producing students of the right cultural integrity and with a predisposition to collaboration, I think what we do on the health literacy point is important and will compound through the system for many years to come.
That's a great point. So we've discussed this a few times around the impact that the universities can have, of course, in collaborative practice sense, you know, forming our next generation clinicians to work as teams, et cetera, et cetera. There's the community health literacy that we can probably work a bit better at improving as well. This is outside of our usual type of work, I guess, but that's definitely a piece that I'd be interested in some of us pursuing because we can have a huge impact as well. We should be able to explain things better. In terms of, I guess, extending, for lack of a better word, Nicole's work, you are a passionate advocate yourself, and you've got, this is not Nicole's work, this is your work as a team, effectively, and you're extending that now. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what you try and do through the, I'm going to mispronounce it, but inpatient advocacy, for example, and other activities that you have?
Yeah, the answer's a lot of things. I think to kind of talk about it in the macro, when people think about curing cancer, they think about it a little bit like the creation of a pill or the solution of a mathematical formula that will unlock the great mysteries of life. And in some ways, immunotherapy is a piece of that. But the truth is that the better way to kind of frame that is to think about that like a big pizza, right? And that a bunch of the pizza can be taken out through people not getting it in the first place and sort of the elimination of behavioural factors. Take sort of basal cell carcinoma, right? If you don't go in the sun, slip, slops, like that stuff makes a difference in that way. Health literacy forms a piece of that as well, that if you know on the breast cancer side that you're a carrier of HOXB13 or the BRCA gene, right, that is very powerful information about the way you triage your own health. And so the preparedness there takes case of a bunch of cases as well. If you then think about the interaction between government policy and GP diagnosis, so what is the screening age for something like colorectal cancer, which has a profound impact because unlike breast cancer, it has a precancerous state. It is a polyp first, it is a carcinoma second, right? And so that has a huge impact. And then thirdly, we move into the sphere I think we spend most time on today is that, well, if we've fallen through the gaps of triage, avoidance, early detection, and we are taking action, what does that piece look like, right? So what are we doing in terms of immunotherapy? How are we equipping surgeons? Are we equipping people to get the best care? How does our care comp internationally? That is kind of the last piece of that. And so inpatient advocacy, I suppose, works with each piece of that to try and bring down the number of cases. It's a little bit like quantitative statistics on baseball. Do I care if the batter gets home through going on base or a home run? I do not, right? The same point here. Do I care if they are cured by surgery, by chemotherapy, or they didn't get it all together? I'd like them to not get it all together, but a non-case is a non-case, and we can be agnostic to the way that comes together. So that framework is kind of the way we attack it.
And so the extension of that question is, why are you here, Tim, today? We talked about the power of sharing, and you have very strong views on that. Do you want to share some of those?
Yeah, as an unself-aware financial person, I'm self-aware enough that I think my story of losing my wife to have had cancer and to have cancer myself, it feels like something that happens to a friend of a friend of a friend. Even to me, it feels so surreal. And I think it's so important for people to see it up close, to talk about it in a way that is very visceral and tangible, right? That over the course of the journey, Nicole had 13 surgeries. She had 70 rounds of chemotherapy. She had the equivalent rounds of immunotherapy. She had over 200 scans and had over 500 blood tests. I was there for all those, right? That's very real and very visceral. And so I think it's very important to talk honestly as a real flesh and blood people up close, belly to belly, about what that experience looked like. I don't want it to feel other, as uncomfortable it is to talk about it, of course.
And one of the aspects of that, particularly early on, I think, was what you call the right to try. And that sort of discussions that you were having with clinicians that were not necessarily keen to be more aggressive, for lack of a better word, in terms of the treatment approaches, and you as a team putting it to them that the people with the most at stake were yourselves, and so that you should have a voice in that. Again, keen to hear probably a little bit more about that one, because I know that it's close to your heart.
Yeah, it's a really good call out. So when Nicole was diagnosed originally, she was given 6 to 12 months, and our little boy was 9 months old at the time as to what that looked like. The oncologist we worked with in the end was really exceptional. We had a very deliberate and objective discussion, and he said, look, the math is pretty simple, right? That what you have is exceptionally bad, the circumstances are really poor. The bet you are making is that if we try, your life will be really miserable, and if it doesn't work, that'll mean the rest of your life is really miserable. And if it works, yes, we could get to something curative, but we could also get a significant extension. They gave Nicole 6 to 9 months. We got 6.5 years. And in the end, it was an exceptional 6 years together. We had a wonderful time. She mothered our little boy Joshua. I took over the fatherhood of a boy who in the end was 6.5 as opposed to 6 months. Selfishness aside, as a single dad, those things are not the same, right? The impact she was able to have to cultivate a child. And so when we think about the individual and what the right to try does and what extending life does, it is often more profound for the individuals around than the individuals themselves. Trying to get emotional. At the very end, we had a discussion about whether we would have done anything any different. And I think it's important for this group to hear that we were completely satisfied that we had unloaded all the bullets in the chamber and got the best out of it. And in the end, Nicole was able to rest and we were able to kind of move on from there, knowing that we did all that we could for our family and left completely, I don't want to say satisfied, but content that we'd made the best decisions in the circumstances we could have.
I think we're probably getting towards the end of the discussion, team. So you see the panel of people we've got in front of us, lots of expertise that we've talked about, and also coming from a lot of different angles that could provide, a massive power of collaboration. So if you want to leave people here in the room, including me, with one kind of key message for the rest of the day to take away, one thing to do, like Tina was suggesting to us before, what would it be?
Use clear language all the time, right? There is no, in the legal profession, there is no need to write in legalese, right? When you write, if you're a radiologist and you write back to the clinician, there is no reason for you to use language the patient can't read. It is a scan of the patient's body, right? They have funded that often out of pocket. That is theirs, and they deserve to be able to read that. And the extension of the way we attack nomenclature, language, particularly of people who are having the worst day of their life when we're speaking to them, I think it's incumbent upon us to speak slowly and clearly and deliberately in language that's addressed to the patient. And if you think of that as a centerpiece, it probably is culturally aligned to every other way we think about the patient. So that's the way I would think about it.
And as a university, of course, we can play a massive role in that as well, right? And I think that's one of the things I'm so interested in terms of the communication of what we do as well as doing it well. So please, I mean, maybe stand up even and clap. Tim, for being here.